everybody, and welcome back to the Bible study series. And wow, today we are getting into chapter 26 of Genesis. And hang on, folks, I want to say something. If you didn't check out part 20, I had to figure out where we are. Part 20, which was going through the second half of chapter 25. Please stop. Please take a moment to do that, because the message, there's a deep rooted lesson, and there's something so amazing that God revealed through his word and through that story. Man, it's incredible, and that's going to continue to play out. So please make sure that you at least read through chapter 25. Check out that video and just some of the things that we noted, and that message was incredible. So today, again, remember, we've our man Abraham, the father of faith, he has passed away, and we're starting to transition into the story of Isaac and his two sons, Jacob and Esau, right? Chapter 25, amazing. And the funny thing is, when it comes to Isaac, it's like Abraham, we had a lot of information. His life was, it was exciting, a lot of stuff going on. It was jam-packed with everything, and we come to Isaac, and it's just like a few quick chapters where we get a glimpse, into his life. We kind of really just transition on into Jacob and Esau, more so Jacob, but and that whole story. So we don't get a lot of feedback about Isaac's life. It seems like it's just kind of low key, and not a lot happening, not a lot of excitement and whatnot. But this chapter right here in 26 gives us an idea of maybe just a few key things that show us, I think, a mirror image, or at least a parallel, very similar to his father Abraham's life. It's really crazy. We do actually already know from the previous chapter, remember, with Abraham and Sarah, how long they were unable to have a child. Okay, and then Isaac and Rebekah, the same thing. It took such a long time, 60 years old, when Rebekah gave birth, okay, to the twins, Jacob and Esau. So it's like we've already seen that similarity, that kind of parallel, and wow, we're going to see a few things here that is kind of that mirror image that give us some insight, into the mindset of Isaac as well, and everything. One on a weaker side, and then also on a really strong wise side as well, which is great. So here we go. As always, pray before getting into the word, and let's do this. So, just as in Abraham's day, a severe famine had struck the land. All right, so Isaac moved to Gerar, where Abimelech, this name might sound familiar, king of the Philistines, lives. Okay, this is important. So King Abimelech, right? There was a King Abimelech in Abraham's day. We saw that, the whole story and situation that happened with them. Here we go, Isaac's day. There's another King Abimelech. It seems like kind of whoever takes over that kingdom, or maybe Abimelech is just a familiar name. I don't know. But this is a different Abimelech. He's king of the Philistines. Okay, this land of Gerar, Philistines. Mark this down. You want to highlight Philistines. This is kind of an interesting thing of how we're introduced to the Philistines here in this story, how it kind of works out, but what's going to happen in the future with this group of people and everything. It's crazy. So here's what happens. Famine strikes. The Lord appears to Isaac, and he says, "Do not go down to Egypt, but do as I tell you. Live here in this land of the Philistines as a foreigner." Okay, live as a foreigner in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. I love that. It's how he starts off. He gives a command, all right, and he says, "I will be with you," though. Just listen to me, obey me, Do as I say, and I will be with you. I will bless you. He gives a command we're in a foreign land and this might not be so comfortable, but immediately says, I got your back. All right? Not only that, I'm going to lift you up. You are going to be blessed. Such a thing of comfort there. And he goes on to say, I hereby confirm that I will give all these lands to you and your descendants, just as I promised your father Abraham. He says, I will cause your descendants to become as numerous as the stars of the sky. We've heard this. This is awesome. And I will give them all these lands. And through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So here we go. The covenant, the promise that God made with Abraham is now being confirmed. He says, I hereby confirm, right? He is bringing about this covenant to Isaac, Abraham's son. And I love what he says right here. All right, he's given him all this information, especially through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. We know that is pointing to Jesus Christ, who is to come from this whole descendant line. But at verse 5, I love this. God says, I will do this. Okay? I'm confirming this, and I will do as I have said, and as I have promised, because Abraham listened to me, and Abraham obeyed all of my requirements, all my commands, all my laws. Right, and so Isaac stayed in Gerar, and we already did the part 1. It was part 19, but part 1 of chapter 25, where we just took time to dedicate to Abraham. We saw the importance, the depth, of his life, and how much his faith meant for everyone, including you and I, and how this whole promise is getting passed down because of Abraham. God says, I will do this because Abraham listened and he obeyed everything that I said, all my instructions, all my laws, all my commands. And wanted to make a quick note I did about this, because it kind of caught me at first. I said laws, like what laws did Abraham obey? What laws were in play? And we had to go back and do a little remember. So make a note of this, that when God's talking about how Abraham obeyed all the requirements and laws, he is pointing back to the laws that God gave Noah. Okay, back in chapter 9, after the flood, and the ark lands on the mountain range, and then Noah and his family, everyone gets out, and God gives Noah a set of commands and laws for his family, and then the new birth of people to follow. And so all of this was getting passed down, obviously, to Abraham, and he obeyed. He followed those laws. Very cool, interesting thing there. So that's what it's talking about. All right, so here we go. Another line of that parallel to Abraham's life. Check this out. Verse 7. When the men who lived there, the Philistines in this land of Gerar, asked Isaac about his wife Rebekah, he said, she is my sister. For he was afraid to say, she is my wife, because he thought, they will kill me to get to her, because she is so beautiful. Yeah, is this not exactly the same thing? All right, that we saw before. Let's read on, and we'll talk about that. But sometime later, King Abimelech, he looked out his window and he saw Isaac caressing Rebekah, and he said, this is his wife. This isn't his sister. So he approaches, right? He calls out Isaac and says, she is obviously your wife. Why did you say this? Why did you lie to us? He says, because I was afraid. I was afraid someone would kill me to get her from me. So we've talked about that before. And here we go. Like father, like son. All right, Abraham and Isaac letting fear creep in, and their faith leak out, right? So the promise that God had given, okay, they believe in it. They believe in it enough to stay, to stay where they are in this foreign, hostile land, okay? But obviously there's times when that fear, they just fear so much for their life, or a certain situation, and that faith in the promise just, it can sometimes get away from us. All right, we saw that with Abraham, a little blip there. All right, and we're seeing that with Isaac here, his son. So very interesting. Isn't that crazy how, it took so long first to have child or children, and then here we go, famine strikes the land and they're told where to go, or where to stay in this case, and then they do the same thing as far as their lack of faith and how they approach this situation. It's pretty interesting, pretty crazy. At this point, the king's like, how could you do this? You could have brought great sin and a great curse on us, and here we go. Hey, anyone who touches her, they're going to be put to death. We can't have this. And boom, we start to move on to the next part. So I want to stop here real quick, because I had you highlight the Philistines. We're about to get into where a little bit of hostility starts to take place and rattle the cage a little bit. I want you to make note of this and why this story is interesting, because the Philistines, they are going to become some of Israel's fiercest enemies. Okay, and when we talk about Israel, we are talking about this covenant family that started with Abraham and is being grown and built through Isaac, and then it's going to come through Jacob, and there we go, and it's going to turn into this people, this nation of Israel. And these Philistines right here, where our man Isaac is residing as a foreigner, okay, he's right here in the midst of their land. He's in fear, obviously, okay, as to what might happen. Okay, and these people right here, they are going to become some of Israel's fiercest enemies. We're going to read all about that in the rest of the Old Testament, and it gets pretty intense. All right. So, like the study Bible says, it says, although friendly, this is ironic, although friendly to Isaac here, until we get to this next part a little bit, it gets kind of weird, but this small group of the Philistines was the forerunner of the nation that would plague Israel so much during the time of Joshua, the judges, and King David. All right, so hang on to that, make note of it, and we'll come back to this point and be like, hey, see how this all kind of went, and isn't it ironic? So check this out. In verse 12 it says, when Isaac planted crops that year, here we go, he harvested 100 times more than he planted. All right, for the Lord blessed him. Remember what God said, stay here, I'm with you, I got you. There's famine going on in the lands around. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to bless you. So he became a very rich man, and his wealth continued to grow. All right, we knew of the wealth, and the riches that Abraham had accumulated throughout his time, some in some very weird and unique ways, but other times with just how the Lord was continuing to bless in everything that they stepped foot on or touched. Okay, same thing here with Isaac. All right, he acquired so many flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle and servants, that these Philistines, they became jealous of him. All right, so check out what happens here. In verse 15, the Philistines filled up all of Isaac's wells with dirt. These wells, these were the wells that had been dug by the servants of his father Abraham. Oof. Right? Finally, Abimelech said, you got to go somewhere else, man. Isaac, you got to go somewhere else, for you have become too powerful for us. So, time out real quick. That might seem like a small thing. I want to kind of shine a light on the severity of this type of act. When we're talking about the Philistines filling up the wells with dirt, we already have an idea of what's going on around. Famine, resources are very scarce. Water is like gold. I mean, this is an essential, a necessity, a thing of value, and staking claim to, a part of land. These wells were so important. Philistines became jealous of how Isaac was being blessed and just growing rich in wealth. So they became jealous and they did this act because of that. Alright? So when we talk about that, it says here in the study Bible, a person who dug a well was staking claim to the land. Just mentioned that. Some wells had locks to keep thieves from stealing the water. So to fill in someone's well with dirt was a complete act of war. You want to talk about the kind of the ultimate just disrespect, and we are out to get you. I mean, you're cutting off the lifeline for this family here, for their property, for their land, for their own resource. It was one of the most serious crimes in the land, and Isaac had every right to fight back when the Philistines ruined his wells, yet he chose to keep the peace. Alright, and in the end we're going to see how this plays out. So this is what I want us to start paying attention to right here in terms of the mindset of Isaac. We saw where he had a lapse in faith, but now we're going to start to see a glimpse into his ultimate wisdom, his ultimate faith in God, okay, and just how he goes about handling this situation. Because as we read on, all right, he moves on to the Gerar Valley, where they set up tents and settled down, and he reopened the wells that his father had dug, right, which the Philistines had filled in after Abraham's death. So in 19, Isaac's servants also dug other wells, right, discovered a well of fresh water. Okay, so here we go. They reopen Abraham's wells that his servants had dug, and now here Isaac, they are discovering they have dug one well. So keep this in mind, one well. But then the shepherds from Gerar came and claimed the spring. So here we go, right off the bat, they said, "This is our water," and they argued over it with Isaac's herdsmen. So Isaac named the well Esek, which means argument. Right? So they move on. Isaac's men then dig another well. But again, there was a dispute over it. And so Isaac named the place Rehoboth, which means open, or sorry, he named this place Sitnah, which means hostility. Alright? Moving on, abandoning that one. So they moved on from the first one when it was met with friction. They build it, they dig another one, this is gold for them, right? They're finding water, and then it keeps being met with hostility and argument and friction. Second time, they abandon it, they just move on. Okay? And then they move on and dig the third well. And this time, there was no dispute over it. Finally, so Isaac named the place Rehoboth, which means open space, where he said, "At last, the Lord has created enough space for us to prosper in this land." Bless you, Mason. Mason's over there. And Rocket's right there. Rocket's a cat. Here. Study break. This is Rocket, everybody. Say hey, Rocket.
Hey, Rocky.
Hey, buddy. Oh. He's a good cat. Alright. So if you hear meows or sneezes, I'm sniffling. Everyone's kind of, yeah. That's why. Thanks, Rocket. Finally, they dig a well, and God made a place for them. Hang on to that. The fact that they dug 3 wells. The first 2 were met with dispute and hostility, and how he moved on. I want you to just hang on to that, because watch what happens. Instead of confronting and just going after it, he decides to keep the peace, and watch how this plays out. So from there, Isaac moved to Beersheba, where the Lord appeared to him on the night of his arrival. And Lord God says, I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you, and I will bless you. I love this, that every time we encounter, or the Lord appears and we encounter him, how, and you might say, this is so repetitive, and it's like, yes, I love that. I love that the Lord is repetitive and saying such simple things of comfort. Don't be afraid. Okay, I'm with you and I will bless you. He said that at the beginning of this chapter. He says, I will multiply your descendants and they will become a great nation. And I will do this because of my promise to Abraham. Look how every time that we're encountering the Lord, he's appearing to us. He's just constantly reaffirming, reassuring, giving us comfort. Okay, that's an awesome thing. And I bring this up for I think an important reason, at least in my mind, is that when we at times pray for things, I know that I've done this. I pray for things, and I at times will expect a new or different answer from God. But so often with even my new prayers or my new request, or whatever it may be regarding the situation that's going on, that he answers me the same way, or that he brings about a reminder of how he's already answered me before, with another prayer or something like that. And this is great. It always goes back to his word, though. It always goes back to pointing out something just like this, like it is to Isaac right here, just saying, I am with you, okay? I am going to bless you. I'm going to take care of you. I hear your prayers, okay? I've got you, right? I will do this because of everything that's happening, because of your faith in me and whatnot. And I want you to think about that in your own life, in your own prayer life as well. Sometimes, we get a replication, duplicate answers from God sometimes, but they're reminders. They're such simple things that it might not be the exact specific answer to our prayer, but it's one just like this. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. It's like, what else do we need, to have answered at that point? And I think that's such a cool thing, and when we see this twice now in this chapter. All right. So, pretty cool thing to make note of. So then Isaac built an altar there and worshiped the Lord, and he set up camp at that place. And his servants dug another well. Alright, so check this out. We know of King Abimelech sending Isaac away. There was friction, arguments, disputes over the wells and everything that were going on. So one day this King Abimelech, he comes back. He comes to Gerar with one of his advisors, and Isaac's like, hey, he's like, why have you come here? What's going on? He's like, you obviously hate me since you kicked me out of your land. Alright, King Abimelech replies, he said, we can plainly see that the Lord is with you. So, we want to enter into a sworn treaty with you. So let's make a covenant together. So they do this. They make a covenant. Isaac prepared a covenant feast to celebrate the treaty and everything. And they come into this agreement, and everything just clicks and connects together. And there we go. It seems like what was very hostile, a lot of fear, right? Being approached. We got to make note, 3 times Isaac dug wells, and 2 of those times he had to move on. We got to think of how wise that was. Okay, I like what the study Bible says here. We know this was an act of war. We already talked about that. 3 times Isaac and his men dug new wells. When the first 2 disputes arose, Isaac simply moved on. Finally, there was room for everyone. God made place for them. So rather than start a huge conflict, Isaac compromised for the sake of peace. This is awesome. Such a short, small thing here, right? But here's the lesson. Would you be willing to forsake an important position or valuable possession to keep peace? Ask God for the wisdom to know when to withdraw and when to stand and fight. Okay, so again, I think this gives us a great insight into the wisdom of Isaac that he used here. He's in a foreign land. He's powerful. He could have easily just started an all-out war, which, they took the first step towards that by filling his wells. They could have easily gone into that, and who knows where the story goes. But in perfect faith and wisdom, he simply moves on. The Lord creates space for them. There's no more dispute. And look what happens as a result of that wisdom and his actions there. Doing what he could to keep the peace. How it is then returned to him. They came back. King Abimelech comes back and approaches and say, look, we want to make a treaty. And look at what he says there. Why? We can plainly see that the Lord is with you. And that's why, right? So we want to enter into a sworn treaty, all right? At first they had become jealous because the Lord was blessing. He was just getting an abundance of things. Now they're like, man, you know what? Let's just attach ourselves to him, right? Because it is absolutely clear and evident that the Lord is with this man and his family and his household. Alright, I made a note of this, and this is awesome. Let your life reflect God so clearly that even your enemies or hostile people are attracted to you. That right there is an awesome thing, to where even your enemies, even people that are being hostile to you, finally just get the point, like, wow, let's just come into an agreement, let's make things at peace. And because clearly the Lord is on this person's side, and what are we gonna do if they come against us someday? Type of thing. I love that. Study Bible says, when God's influence in our lives attracts people, even our enemies, we must take the opportunity to reach out to them with God's love. So with the act of war that the Philistines did against Isaac and everything, two separate times, and then they filled Abraham's wells, as well, everything. Isaac, at this point, he could have easily harbored all of this that was going on and said, sorry, Buck, no, we're not doing this. But look at what he does. This was an opportunity, right? And he approached them with God's love and grace, and Isaac prepared a covenant feast to celebrate. They ate and drank together, and the next morning they each took a solemn oath not to interfere with each other. Isaac sent them home again, and they left in peace. So that is awesome. They go on to find another well. Alright, and Isaac named the well Shabah, which means oath. They do things and name things as far as the situation that's going on. I like that a lot. And to this day, the town that grew up there is called Beersheba, which means well of the oath. Very cool. So great lesson there. I think that we can apply some of that, actually a lot of that, into our lives now, that wisdom and everything, that discernment, and look how it plays out. And when these people that were hostile to him kicked him out of their land, filled his gold, with dirt, covered up an essential part of life for them, he just kept the peace and kept moving on until God made a place for them. And even when these enemies came and approached him and said, we want to just join with you, let's squash this, he didn't harbor anything. He said, I greet you with love, and we will make this covenant together. And that's an awesome thing. And again, we want to come back to this, because later we're going to see, this Philistine people and the Israelite people how this grows and just turns into something not what we see here. All right, but nevertheless, verse 34. I want you to also highlight that Esau at the very end, he married two Hittite wives, Judith, the daughter of Beri, and Basemath, kind of a cool name, like a band, the daughter of Elon. But Esau's wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebekah. Esau did this. He married women that were outside of the covenant family, so to speak. He married, these Hittite women and whatnot, and this made Isaac and Rebekah furious, and this was not a good thing. It's important to note that because we're going to see kind of what happens next when it comes to Jacob and everything. That's the end of chapter 26. Hope you got some good notes there, and we see how a few of these things start to play out. Chapter 27 is massive. This one is going to be much like chapter 25, and it is just jam-packed with a lot of stuff. So be ready for that one. We're going to discover some pretty awesome things and how we transition from the end of chapter 25. We took a little break here from that story. It's going to pick up though right here in chapter 27 when we dive into it and how all of that is going to play out. It's incredible. So till next time, folks.